Good afternoon and welcome back to this, what I hope is going to be a session which is going to be exciting and sort of unpacks the idea of theatre. This itself is a theatre, as we know at the Jaipur Literature Festival. Every time you weave through crowds, it's very theatrical in many ways. MK Raina leaving the stage yesterday was Halla Bol, and he was the master of theatre yesterday. But I'm going to start with our two wonderful writers who've edited this particular book. And I was just arguing with them about some stuff in the book, and they said, we didn't know it was there. I said, well, we did talk about it. So I'm going to start with both of you. In recent times, we have seen theatre come back to the streets. This is not the 70s, this is not the 60s, this is not Margaret Thatcher's UK. This is a very different world where capitalism has completely taken over, including in the communist countries. Capitalism is prevailed. You've seen the protests in New York. You've seen the protests in Hong Kong. You've seen the protests in your country. And we've seen the CEA, NRC campaigns on the street. How do you see that? And put that into context, because that was theatrical. Anybody went to the protests at Jamia during any of you?
Yeah,
so you saw these, this wonderful murals, street art, music happening, people coming to perform. Set the context a little bit, one for the West and one again for India.
Hello. Yeah, actually, thank you, and thank you, JLF, for having us and discussing the book. Because a book like this doesn't make sense if, we don't take it to the public domain, to take it to the popular domain. It can't be restricted to academic world. And it was really 2011, the Nirbhaya protest, which inspired me to start writing about it. And one of my, favorite moments in that was when, the protests were very inspiring. We were out in the streets, we were marching, our students were marching, people were coming from different parts. But I think the moment of change was when Maya Rao performed her walk. Because for me, it meant that this, girl, this very young lady who had been brutally assaulted, and she was so brave, the way she was, sort of reaching out.
Maya Rao is an actress, a wonderful actor on stage, and she did this particular piece which was very powerful and really brought every hall to a standstill.
Because what she did, instead of playing the victim of sexual violence, she actually devised this walk, a very assertive, bold, and soon, how we look at it, protest, that it has to be assertive, it has to be inspiring. And while Maya Rao walked in that rhythm, we heard Jyoti Singh's voice come across, and we were walking with her. And then, of course, there was a series of protests, CAA, where, the women were sitting, we were all in the periphery. Suddenly, they were deliberately objectifying themselves to tell us that please come and intervene. Now, though they were very inspiring, we know Arab Spring happened, we know Occupy Wall Street happened, and there were a lot of very interesting idioms which were anti-capitalist, anti-majoritarian conservatism, which is, sort of all over the world, particularly in India. But what happens after the protests? And that's something which worried us, because those idioms were there, they were, interesting tactics in the domain, but how do you make it, something worthwhile, something which takes us more towards, a different society, a society which we seem to have lost under this, as you mentioned, Sanjoy, this onslaught of capitalism, neoliberalism. We wanted that social ethos back, and the protest, again, just to come back to Nirbhaya, ultimately, it was that's a time when the right-wing party actually used the mileage protecting women. Stay at home, we will protect you. That, becomes a problem with these sort of mass protests, and then you don't know where it is going.
And you brought about a law that didn't quite work because it wasn't debated, and it wasn't necessarily the best law to come into being. But let me ask Sylvia. Sylvia, set the stage for us. in Europe, in your part of the world, the kinds of protests, and it continues even now as we sit on this stage. So set the stage for us.
Okay, so I'm speaking from basically different parts of Europe. So one is where I originally come from, where I was born, and it is former Yugoslavia. I don't know how much people are familiar with. Now it's many different small countries, including Serbia, where I am actually from. And the other is the UK, where I currently live. So I just start briefly with the downfall of Yugoslavia, which was the 1990s, because it was my first encounter with, protests are theatrical. This is theater, and theater actually helps us in these situations. So it was the 1990s. Yugoslavia was falling apart. It ended up in a civil war. And we were in Belgrade. It was the warmongering Serbian regime in power. The war was starting, and the student protest starts. And I'm a student at that time. There was an anti-war, anti-regime protest, which was very violent, and 2 people were killed, a policeman and a protester. Water cannons were brought out, tear gas and all that. And then the next morning, the center of Belgrade looked so surreal because army was brought in. So all of a sudden, the central square in front of the National Theater, in front of this big monument of whoever leader of the nationalist past, was there on a big horse and all of that, it was all surrounded by tanks. So this is an area with cafes. This is an area where you usually go for a nightlife, for a meal, for a walk. And it felt surreal. It felt like what's going on. It was, Tiananmen was still quite resonant. And we were thinking, is this going to be a new Tiananmen? It was all deserted and these tanks on the street. So in the evening, mostly students, but then also other citizenry gathered in the center, and we sort of occupied the center. And it was a very tense moment, thinking, okay, are they going to, activate those tanks, or is it going to be peaceful? And then a stage got erected. A famous actor at the time came out. It started to become carnivalesque. It started to become performative. And at that moment, it felt a little bit like Scheherazade, like sort of performing to keep the danger at bay. And I think it kind of loosened up the violence. It kind of made a stop to the violence, and also made it sustainable. Made the momentum could last longer. Now a similar, like more than 20 years later, or 30 even, 30 years later, we have students on the streets, students walking from one city to another, very much looking like some of these performative events of the 90s we did. We walked like prisoners because we said we are the prisoners of the regime. We chained ourselves, all sorts of things. So they are doing similar things. But what happened, the impetus for this was that a roof of a train station fell on people, and it was a new reconstructed train station in Serbia, various foreign investors, various little shady dealings about who gets to do this, and all is safe and wonderful, and of course people got killed. So this was the initial sort of trigger, and now there is a whole sentiment there. It's anti-government, but it's also anti-opposition. It's like it's sort of anti-power, a mixture of what happened in the 90s and the Occupy vibe. So I end there for a moment.
MK, why are theater people, many of us live on the fringes. Why are governments so frightened of expression that comes out of theater?
Obviously, the government doesn't want it. It's a straight question. Another is the kind of message that theater people... You see, I say, DNA of theater, whether it is folk, experimental, is dissent and discussion, is a debate. Now, they don't like that. It's very, very simple. And the kind of culture that, just face it, they are also manufacturing, they have got their organizations, is typical bhakti wala, filmy, and garish. I think that today in India, the contest is the aesthetic also. When you were talking, I suddenly remembered we talked about this happened, Shaheen Bagh, this happened. I was wondering, I call Mahatma Gandhi one of the greatest theater directors. Look at his march, Dandi March. It's not only that he made history.
The very idea of the hunger strike as well.
Hunger strike and walking 200 kilometers with millions of people and just taking a little bit of salt. But it has impacted, it went through, things. And we have to learn from freedom movement and what is happening to our theatre particularly. We cannot make it at this stage in this country agitation, propaganda, Zindabad, Zindabad, Murdabad. It has to get into the grains of the, real questioning. And that's what Aruna, before our session, said, you have to get down to the people, You cannot leave countryside and think that I'm protesting in Delhi and I'm relevant. I'm not relevant. I'm relevant only when I have community with me. Community defends you. Community gets up you. A simple case, I work in Kashmir. I never took ever from 2000 till date a security ban with me, which was some people said you should take. There were so many accidents that I would have been shot a couple of times. That's beside the point. But it was the village people who had set the ring around me, which I came to know after 2 years, that when they started laughing at me, what was happening, and there were threats coming. That is when the theatre person becomes relevant, and my work becomes relevant, because it is with them and they are part of it. The 4 or 5 villages are with me. And when I walk, I'm walking in my own home mohalla. I think that is what we have to relearn from our freedom movement. This whole banned literature of plays, which is in the archives of India. Look at it, how that time, the playwrights, writers, great writers, how they wrote the scripts. British could not catch them because they were written in such a beautiful way. British had no way they could catch them. You have done something anti-national or anything. Today you do anything is anti-national. That's another problem. So I think we have to go back to people today.
We have to go back to people. Bishnupriya has Hindi film, and I'm saying Hindi film specifically, and Bollywood. Has it failed theatre? Where today everybody who comes to theatre thinks they're going to straight become a Shah Rukh Khan or a Manoj Bajpayee, etc. You've been studying and teaching theatre now for 2 decades, and you've been involved also with Meta and so many other theatre programs. Is there less and less of that energy from young people where you're taking issues to the street in the way that people like Safdar Hashmi, Jagori, etc. took them to the street then? Or in fact, even your father, Utpal Dutt, in his time, when he took Jatra to the people?
I don't think...
Sorry, everybody knows Utpal Dutt, the actor, Bishnupriya's Utpal Dutt's daughter.
I think they are 2 very different fields of culture. Because when the Bombay film industry is a film industry which works like a culture industry. That's not where the political theatre can exist, because, there's a very different sort of thing about culture industry. There's a capital investment, there's the idea of profit. And the theatre which I think we are talking about, the political theatre, it's a certain genre. It's not just politics and theatre, that every theatre is political and, there's a redistribution of power. There's nothing called arts for art's sake. I don't think, it's so simple. So if I keep the Bombay cinema apart, which is more like a culture industry, they will cater to some sort of mass entertainment, and maybe there'll be some inklings of politics because, that might come in. But I think we are talking about a genre of very important political theatre which is engaged, which is dedicated to issues. And because, they are amateur sometimes, they work with very little money. I've seen how my parents were completely dedicated to the theatre, and they deliberately took no money from the state, no money from the corporate world, because they felt then they would have the independence to say what they wanted to. And they were the first generation of citizen artists after independence. It was very important to be in the public domain, important to, have an agonistic view of the state. And I don't think they were so naive that they believed that, socialism will come to India, we'll have a socialist state like the USSR. But I think what they really thought, that even to make democracy a success, there has to be equitable distribution of wealth. the inequalities, the structural inequalities has to be addressed. Social citizenship has to be addressed as much as, the civic citizenship. And I think that's where, political theater is located. And I think that's where we can still hope. I don't suffer from any melancholia. I think nostalgia is productive. That genealogy is productive. And I think this can be a clarion call to fight against capitalism. And if the people come together, there are solidarities across different movements, identity politics, what we've been discussing about based on issues. I think that theater which goes with the people, which sort of takes the strategies from the people, I don't believe it's propaganda. Whose propaganda? Because, there is no left movement at the moment. But to go into the street, find out what are the issues the people are facing, I think we still have hope. And I'm really invested in that theater.
Trying to create or push back on inequalities to ensure democracy survives. Silvia, Annie Ernaux, the Nobel laureate, wrote in one of the chapters, she said that, I was so hoping that movements like the Arab Spring, etc., then brought a coming together of communism and democracy with a happy ending. But we didn't quite have a happy ending, have we?
No, we didn't have a happy ending. But I do think that that's why this sort of looking back at the left legacies is so important in our view, I think, with the book. And again, not as a kind of nostalgia or revival or let's revive Soviet Union or Yugoslavia wouldn't be so bad to revive with some modifications, to be honest. But again, these are impossible projects. I think we need to look at those legacies because what we have there is a different experimentation, even if it failed, but it's like Beckett said, fail better. So I think maybe we should look at that to fail better if need be, because there are things there that take us beyond these liberal capitalist paradigms. And at least in case of Yugoslavia, some of them were successful. Free education, free healthcare, experimentations in worker self-management, we had that. Plenums that are now students using as a democratic way of deliberating. So all these, and of course it got in this degenerated maybe at some points, and so. But I think we planned economy even. So I think we need to turn to these, not to revive them as such, but to look at these models, because in this world, we have the climate change, we have the rise of the right, we have a certain, look at the situation with Trump and all these billionaires. I think we are entering some kind of high-tech feudalism with them. So I think it's really important to look at these models because they might take us beyond capitalist paradigms. And culture and theater, I suppose, gives us, it doesn't make this change, but it allows for a different political imagination. And I think we need a political imagination to start a new practice.
A different political imagination, absolutely. MK, did the left fail because they thought that they owned everything to do with street theater and the movement of theater? Was that their failing?
Absolutely correct. They failed to understand the rise of communalism in this country. I'm making a public statement about it. They failed to understand what is happening to the minorities, what is happening to the Dalits. We talk of exodus of Kashmiris, yes. It was a terrible thing that has happened in Kashmir, and nothing has happened. Bullet train almost 6 hours from New Delhi, you can go to Srinagar now. The train has come, but people have not returned. Even 10 people have not gone back home. That is the priority of the state. But yes, I think that's why I say left has to reinvent and rethink today. I mean, you have to make Indian Marx. We need that. I mean, I try to read them, but I go, today if you ask me theater, I would like to do a simple theater. I don't want theatricality, I don't want big sets, it's not possible now. Yes, but the content, what I have to tell to people about their poverty, how they can be empowered, women can be empowered. But let me tell you, there has been one very remarkable movement, I've been part of that. was when the literacy movement started in the country. There was a group, it's a massive voluntary group called Bharat Gyan Vigyan Samiti, and I got involved with them in making, little directors in the remotest area of Bihar, Jharkhand, and that place. For 20 days, we'll train them, and when I came back, I was very happy at home. Told me, you are very happy today. I said, I have a hope, because I saw the poorest of the poor, Radha, Titri Bai fighting. You can't imagine the landscape where they were fighting. They had become just literal. They were fighting mafia in Dhanbad coal area. What women were asking through demonstration and creating little plays was, we want rights, just small rights, to load these trucks. And if you look at those women, they are steel almost, really steel. They pick up heavy loads of this. Another woman, and she fought election against a mafia, and mafia had come during the campaign to put a gun against her. Said, you take 5 lakhs, 1 jeep, but withdraw. So she got very nervous. She said, look, let me think. I said, Radha, what did you do after that? I said, nobody knew after that where I sleep in the night, campaign. And she won the election. And I said, how does it feel to you? She said, sir, wo workshop mein jo aap sikhaye the na, today I entered DM's office and he has to stand up. I don't have to wait for hours outside. That was a great, believe me, that should have continued in this country. There should have been support systems, because the moment they see poor people becoming empowered, withdraw the scheme. And that is why, they are still fighting there. They are on the ground. Titri Devi is on a landscape, 20 kilometers landscape, which is underground coal burning for the last 20 years. It's gas chamber you enter. You can smell all the time gas. Flames are four stories high. They live there. They fight there, do their plays, take their classes. And she told me, I said, how does it feel like? And she said, now I'm at Tipa means thermal impression. I'm not getting money by putting Tipa. I'll know how much he's paying me. And अब मैंने कहा तो ये तो dangerous area है, यहाँ तो there are mafias. You know what he said? She said, मरना होगा or मारना होगा. We'll die or we'll kill. That is what the empowerment is needed in this country. Theatre has to be there. That is, they're doing in Bombay, Delhi, is all right. Those are...
Bishnupriya, but there's a beautiful chapter where you look at these villages, I think in Chhattisgarh, where they've been erecting in each village a stone, a green stone, I think. And when they do that, the villagers come together as a village activity. And in many ways, it's a symbol of pushing back government from that village. I forget the word that you've used for that. Tell us about that, and what is the context of villagers now taking back their lives through this very theatrical setting of setting up the headstones to their ancestors?
Yes, it's about the Pathalgari movement. And what is very interesting is how they evoke the constitution against the state to actually sort of consecrate those stones as a mark of protest. And this is, of course, the essay by Nivedita Menon. This book is a collaborative essay, collaborative work. It's a collective process. We have Professor Urmimala Sarkar, who has been very integral, and a lot of others. We've been working together. And this was, that what do we do today? Like, even if the left had failed, I think it's important to make a distinction between the cultural left and the political left. And in the cultural left, these strategies of going to the people, working with the people, I think they were like very important sort of, strategies from the ground. And the Pathalgari movement actually sort of, took up that to set up these little stones and, sort of rally people around. And in the same essay, like Nivedita Menon talks about, where again the state is using the constitution and the people are opposing it, particularly around the LGBT movement. So it can go both ways, depends on the movement. And like MK said, the context by which you actually, take up what will work, what is needed at that point of time. And just one, what really moved me, the way MK starts his book, where he says, I would not have been what I am if it was not for the India which was there, which had free education, which had free health, it gave you free access to move around the country. And, I think that's where we are still talking about the left. We are aware of its failures, but I think we can't abandon it. It will be like throwing the child out with the birth.
MK, is new theatre being played out in movements like Advani Saab's Rath Yatra, Rahul Gandhi's Pad Yatra?
In rural areas, yes. I saw it during the last elections in Bihar. Youngsters, they are not trained by MK Raina, and they have not gone to drama schools, but they are very ingenious. You see, one of our great playwrights and director, Habib Tanvir, had a lovely quote. He said, our village people are economically poor, but culturally they are richest. That is what we have to put our finger on that culture. And first I have to understand, I've been doing it and trying to understand. Then with them you can do it. It cannot be that I come and direct and that's over. In political struggles that doesn't happen. Particularly, you see what you want to change India. I have a dream of India which I've inherited from my parents, from my school, from my teachers, from my poets, from my painters. I want that to be handed over, little bit improved, on to next generation. But you can't tell them that I'm anti-national if I say something. I will question. That's my constitutional right. That is very important. We need.
But isn't that the role of theatre to question?
I'll tell you what they did. They realized they use this little technologies also. They said, "We come here. We'll show you something." They had become an anchor person. They become correspondents. Little things. And you should have seen what the political message in the local language, the way and the images they were using, the aesthetics they were using, was out of books. It was amazing to see them work. They need to be empowered. What the our urban India is doing, we are trying to abandon them. We should not be doing that. Each one of us has a responsibility. If we believe that India has to change, please take few hours out in a week to educate a little boy. That is our cultural action. I wouldn't say cultural action is entertaining and dancing, which we see it every time, bhangradas and other. No, cultural action is when I empower him and he becomes a great citizen of India, like we all have become in our own way. That is what is empowering. Theatre should be taking that as an agenda, and the left particularly should be taking that.
Sylvia, in post-reunion Germany, in places like Potsdam, etc., you saw a whole resurgence of companies coming who had broken from their past in a sense of the wall and started creating great new work, whether it's in Poland, whether it's in Serbia, whether it's in East Germany. France, we know, has also got so much of subsidy, and yet despite all of this, more and more we are seeing Europe leaning to the right.
Yes, well, it's a difficult question, isn't it? I think there is a certain, I suppose these categories have become very blurred. And you see a lot of appropriation of leftist ideas, paradigms, rhetorics by the right. You also have a certain, take yellow vests, for example, and there is an article about that as well in an essay. So, they are progressive in a sense of their quest for workers' rights, they're right about that, but they're also very strongly anti-immigration. We see that in Germany as well, with the sort of left-wing parties, but then they would have some really right-wing stances on certain things, especially immigration, for some reason, for reason of feeling that they're overflown by foreigners. So I think it's I think that's sort of not knowing anymore. Even look at countries like UK, where I live. We have a Labour government, and we are very happy that we finally have a Labour government and the Tories are gone. But
the Labour government is now going to cut the budget for the arts, just for the record.
Yes, but I want to say that Labour government is is very centrist now. So there are a lot of sort of labor supporters who are saying, okay, is this labor still? So it's that sort of not, how to recuperate. Theater, theater can do only so much, but I think theater has a certain power in being here and now, and mobilizing, but also reflecting, challenging, questioning. And the tradition of theater from Yugoslavia, other Eastern Europe, is not so much of the street, but of the improvisation, of the unexpected happening on stage, of talking to the audience in an Aesopian language, in codes that we will all understand, that are actually critical. And that is still happening. So now, for instance, with this student protests in Serbia, every theater supports students, and every play ends with actors coming out to bow to the audience with red hands, because this is the symbol of the protest, meaning you have blood on your hands to the government. So every show ends with that. So I don't know, but there is also, I think these are some moments that are hopeful. These are some moments that maybe take us in new directions.
Sorry. One of the things you talked about, how theater is the here and the now, and how theater can bring about change to some extent. In one of the chapters in the book, you talked about Maya Rao. Maya Rao undresses herself pretty much like the Draupadi Haran. She takes off layer by layer her sari, and then she puts it back on with the writing about the Constitution, in many ways saying, the state is trying to derobe me, but the Constitution will protect me. That power, that very visible and visual power, today you're seeing more and more. The opposition parties have sort of cottoned on to how the Constitution should be saved. How can the power of theatre be captured in this kind of way? Obviously not by the National School of Drama anymore. Never.
But I have to think.
What about in schools? I mean, let her answer and then you come back. What about in schools? What's our responsibility?
Sanjoy, this is something which, we've been sort of thinking about a lot. A protest has a lot of performative manifestation, but it is not really performance or theatre. Theatre cuts into it and sort of creates a break, a quotidian, but it comes with a certain aesthetic intervention. And I think that's very important, because there's a whole tendency to say that, street theatre, political theatre, there's no aesthetics. But they have their own aesthetics, which is an aesthetic of resistance. With Maya Rao, with a lot of other people, like, when my parents used to do street theatre, there's a transfer. And like, Sylvia was talking about, the East European, particularly Bertolt Brecht theatre, there has to be a sort of a transfer from the streets to the theatre and theatre back to the streets. I think that's where that aesthetic intervention is something which is, very important for the theatre, and that's what we have. And when we take that out and we sort of take it to different parts, I think it works. And, Maya Rao has done it. She's brought that, what she did, that derobing in that Draupadi moment, and puts it back. She brought it to her full-length play, The Loose Woman. I know many people have done it, and and I think that's where the theatre has that aesthetic power, which just a protest, though it seems very performative, inspiring, but we can also lose the momentum. And I think the point which you're trying to make is the idea of populism. How these sort of conservative right-wing powers in India and all over the world, like the Ratha Jatra, tries to bring a lot of people together on these sort of issues like religion. They try to create this binary between elite and non-elites, as if they're enemies, and instead of building solidarities, they tear us apart. Theatre doesn't try to create the consensus. It tries to bring little dissent, which is what democracy is all about. That's where debates are all about. We all want to be in the public sphere and want to debate. We don't want
MK,
censorship.
you wanted to add something, but I also wanted to just... MK, one second. Just to what you add whatever, but also in the past, through history, starting with the Romans, they set up the circus to distract people, right? That was theater. They didn't want people to look at the key issues. Instead, they fed people to the lions, or they said, kill each other. It's so much more exciting than looking at whether you're roti, kapda, or makan. Add to whatever.
You see, presently, if you ask me that theatre, one traditional actor, very old actor, I asked him, what does it mean to you? He has got national award also. He said, his own form, Mr. Bhand Pather, it is, we are the people who bring the problem of the people to the rulers, and the rulers' problem to the open public. That was, today, I think definition of theatre has changed. It's no more a proscenium. Everybody's, the frame we work in. We are using all kinds of things. I mean, if I look at myself, I use folk theatre, I use contemporary theatre, I use film, I use...
Digital?
Regional theatre, I use music, big way, and call it Brechtian or not Brechtian. It is there, and it serves my purpose, I will use it. And that actors in Indian theatre has to be aware. This experiment, Sabdar died. We formed a trust in his name called...
Sabdar Hashmi was killed while he was protesting in a street theatre in Meerut, right?
No, he was just on the outside of Delhi, which is now almost Delhi, NCR. And he was attacked during that play, and he died next day. And when we formed a trust, he and I, we were very great friends, and we used to talk a lot of things, let us do this, let us do that. So we formed this trust, and a lot of painters, writers, musicians, theatre people, filmmakers, architects, is a big coalition, a national coalition. What we have thought that these kind of the right kind of constitutional rights and ideas cannot always come only through theatre. We use street exhibition of painters, we use image and the word together. We experiment all the time, 36 years, we innovate some new idea, and then that goes to the country. People take it away. It has been for months, it goes on travel. But the costs are very, very low. The whole idea is that it has to be very cheap, costly, so that anybody can make it possible. For example, on his birthday, we just send a blank poster, Sabdar Hashmi's birthday. It's a National Theatre Day. And it goes to 3,000 theatre groups. And they do plays, and whatever they do that day, they do poetry recitation, they do plays, sing, all kinds of things. And they send this poster to us, filled what we did. So we get the feedback, and whatever we do at SAHMAT is not MK Raina's ideas or your idea. It is a whole collation. We put this whole across the table through emails to people. This is what we think, please respond. And we get great ideas. I think today, ideas are, point is idea chahiye. Or idea is very, that is, it doesn't need money.
Lack of ideas. I'm going to open it up in a second to both Urmimala and to you, Bishnupriya. Educational institutions have to be, in many ways, the foundation to the idea of theatre and the idea of ideas and the idea of questioning those in power. Yet today, despite the fact that the JNU year on year get listed as amongst the top universities in the country, there's this whole effort to look at it differently, as to say that they're against the narrative. And in today's day and age, even in your department that you head, which is the Department of Art and Aesthetics, you would be hard-pressed to set up any kind of protest theatre.
I don't think so. I think we fight for our autonomy, our departmental autonomy. We've fought for it and we will win. I've been in Teachers Association, our students' unions fight. We will continue to fight. Of course, there'll be censorship, pressure. What else do we expect? But we will fight and we will win.
We will fight, we will win. Questions from the audience. Yep. We'll take clusters of questions and then I'll feed it to you. So the lady in the front and the gentleman in the sunglasses.
My question is to MK. MK, what influence, if any, Badal Sarkar and Third Theatre have on your art today? And why do you think it's been forgotten completely, although it was the very strong form
We got
of
that.
theatre?
Badal Sarkar on your art, has it been forgotten? The gentleman with the glasses? I'll come to you in a second. Go ahead, just speak into it, it's alive. If you can stand.
Thank you so
Not
much.
working. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go for it, go ahead. This
Is it? Thanks. That was theatrics. But what an august gathering and what a good
Question.
session. This question is that theatre is also being used by the parties, political parties, to set narratives. Right? So while you have a theatre which is opposing an idea, you'll also have theatre which is building ideas for a certain narrative to happen. How do we counter that?
How do we counter political parties using narrative? The lady there, and then we'll come back. And I'll come to this side in a
We
second.
have all been talking about politics and politics. I was just wondering, you came out with for one point, school education. Where is the theatre in school education? In schools like Sindhia School, where my father was a theatre person, there also theatre is diminishing. So why don't we do something about that? Because these children are only going to grow up and coming onto the streets with it, with the ideas.
So just to set the context of that, in the new educational program, theatre, dance, music is all part of the education program. The problem is that there are not enough theatre teachers because they thought National School of Drama, by making many of them, will churn out theatres. You can't do that. You can't have 20,000 teachers coming out of the National School of Drama, but let me ask you to...
Not only that, the National School of Drama training is to make actor or a director in a very avant-garde way, a little bit of a dash of the folk. But what we are talking about is social change, asking questions, innovating ideas, believing in democracy. That is absent even in the drama schools. It is not being done. As per Badal Sarkar, you say, he is alive everywhere. This is a centenary. We just did a seminar on him, and in September we are going to do 3-day national festival in Calcutta. He is in Tripura. You will see him in Northeast, everywhere talking Badalda. Delhi, there are groups. Some of them are filmmakers. But at the same time, you have to understand, we as Ustad ne jahan tak kaam kiya na, the master did his work. And teacher should not only be ready, when I reach his stage, he has to go beyond that stage. That is it, everybody. That Badal Sarkar ka kaam hai, it's live. But nobody has taken it forward. My problem with the state theatre, it just goes round and round and round, it is boring. Going around in the Badal.
Bishnupriya, you want to take the question about the education?
Yes, because I think in school it's very important to sort of start, with theatre. But over the years in India, what I've seen is a lot of the elite schools still sort of pursue it very seriously when, it should be all over. And it comes with a certain cultural conditioning and culture capital, which is dangerous for the theatre because, ultimately when they grow up, they become the audience and the connoisseur, which should be happening all over in the public schools, in the, the government schools, in the schools in the villages. I think that was a vision of, India at one time. And I think, yes, that's somewhere where people who are seriously dedicated to theatre should go. And this idea of a culture capital that, who comes to theatre are really the rich and the elite and the urban middle class. I think we have to break that sort of
I think the exciting thing is there's hundreds of new playwrights across languages from the smallest cities and villages. Go ahead, the gentleman in the front, and then who was at the back? I saw a hand at the back somewhere. Go ahead.
First of all, I would like to congratulate all the panelists.
Question,
it's wonderful.
because we've got 1 minute 43.
The question is, theatre does have a transformative value. I would just like to know, how theatre, what role theatre can play in transforming the criminals in the jails, inmates.
What role can theatre play with transforming criminals in jails? The lady in the yellow and the lady in the red. Yeah, go ahead. Behind you. Go ahead, ma'am. Yeah.
So
Just
you were
stand.
talking,
Stand, please.
You were talking about theatre and college students, and as a college student, I was thinking, how do we bring back the form of nukkad to the street? Because I think it's been
How do we bring back
commercialized.
Nukkad to the street? Last question.
So understanding that theatre is required to empower and to transform, is there any policy ask that one can ask for to institutionalize this?
Is there any policy asked? To just answer the gentleman who asked about prison and theatre, Punita from the Yuva Ekta Foundation also happens to be my wife. She works with children in prison using the arts and expressive theory, children in conflict with law. So have a conversation with her and I'll put you in touch. For the others, go ahead. MK, you want to start?
On what? What is the question?
You
You talk about jail.
Yeah.
You see, these are very special areas. MK Raina is not qualified. I should not have delusion about me that I can handle criminals. I need to be trained first myself. When I work with the children in Kashmir stressed areas, I have child psychologists, educationists, painter, theatre people. All 5 of us have eyes on each kid there. I'm not equipped alone. So you see, even you enter into the area of prison, you need 1,000 permissions. You're not welcome. I want to come to a play and they will let you. It's not like that. I think state needs to be pushed into the area of using theatre for transformation. And theatre can, let me tell you, we don't create revolutions. We only create ideas.
And questions. And questions.
And question and ideas.
Sylvia, closing.
I just want to respond to a question about how it can go either way, and that we don't, maybe it speaks to some of the transformative power of theater, but also it's not something that we should assume, because it can go either way. It can be appropriated by right wing. I've seen in that troubled downfall of Yugoslavia, people standing up to very national and singing along to very nationalistic moments in nationalistic plays, as well as these very progressive, very politically brave moments. So I think we should not take it for granted. And I think as every cultural product, it can go, or process, it can go either way.
It can go either way on policy tweak.
But I think that's also connected to the very interesting question about narratives and grand narratives, and also to the question on prison, because who's a criminal and whose eye are we seeing them as criminals? And, you know, we've had jail performances which have been very political, impactful. You know, the hunger fasts in jail under colonialism, who were seen as the militant nationalists, the terrorists.
Or Bobby Sands in Ireland, for
Even
example.
today,
Which
yeah.
was,
So the idea of this transformative power and the question of narrative, which was a question, as long as the narrative is not hegemonic, I think that's where, you know, it makes you think, it makes you sort of rationalize and then intervene. And like you said, it asks question. Policy is a state matter. And, you know, do we want to go with a state like the one we have now? Or do we want to create, you know, questioning a state which has proved to be not very democratic?
do we need to go to the left or right? We don't quite know that. Just for an example, in Florida and in Texas, the art budget in schools has been cut down to 0, meaning an art teacher cannot buy a piece of paper, let alone a crayon or a pencil to run an art class. We need to look to our own models today. We don't need to look anymore to the left or the right or the west. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists, M.K. Raina,
can you give me 10
Sylvia,
seconds?
and Bishnupriya.
Sanjay,
I think we still need the
you
left
think
a bit.
To the left.
Whole discussion started
To the
with me
left.
walking out yesterday. But I want to take first 2 things. The integrity of this festival is very dear to me. And the kind of ideas you are bringing here. I did not walk for what the press has written. I walked because I did not get an opportunity, because it was not a like discussion we are doing here. There's a monologue going on for 17 minutes, and after that I said, there is no time for me to say anything, and if a counter panelists start singing and acting and other things, no discussion. So I quietly walked out. Not the reason what was being in the press.
But we also defend MK's right to walk away as anybody is on this platform. Thank you.